It was supposed to be just another Thanksgiving dinner. Family gathered, turkey on the table, everyone pretending to be normal. But the moment my sister stood up and tapped her glass, everything shifted. Her voice cut through the room like a knife, crisp and confident, announcing to everyone in that overly polished tone of hers, "Mom and Dad are signing the house to me. Emily gets nothing." The room erupted in cheers, whistles, and claps, but not from me. I didn't clap. I didn't even blink. My hand froze midair, fork still in my grip. I didn't need to react. I didn't need to let anyone see how the ground beneath me had just cracked open. My sister looked like a princess, glowing with everyone's attention, while I sat in the shadows, once again forgotten. But you already know what's coming, don't you? The house wasn't a gift, it was a trap. A bomb wrapped in pretty paper. I was the one who had always been left behind, left out of their plans. Until now. I didn't want to ruin her moment, but the truth? It was time to make them see the real cost of what they'd done. The house wasn't a blessing, it was a debt, and soon Jenna would learn exactly what she was inheriting. But that's not even the worst part. No, the worst part was what happened next, what I did with the truth. Have you ever been the one who got left behind? Comment below. Tell me your story. And stay tuned, because the real shock is just about to hit. Dad, should I tell them, or will you? The silence that followed was deafening. No one knew it yet, but the night had just begun to unravel.
My name is Emily Nolan, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the quiet one. The one who didn't get the attention, the one who always seemed to fade into the background of family photos while my younger sister Jenna stole the spotlight. It wasn't always like that, though. Once upon a time, Jenna and I shared everything. Bedrooms, secrets, even dreams. But somewhere along the way, she became the golden child, and I became, well, the other one. We grew up in the small white house on Oak Street in Springfield, Illinois, a place that looked like it could be in one of those holiday card photos. Perfectly neat, always well kept, with a yard of flowers that never seemed to stop blooming. Our parents worked hard. At least that's what they always said. Mom was a teacher, and Dad worked as an accountant for a local firm. It was a quiet life, the kind of life that didn't scream for attention, the kind of life that seemed to fit into the perfect little mold our neighbors all envied. But perfection is a lie, and I knew that long before Jenna did. You could tell, just by the way Mom and Dad looked at each other when they thought I wasn't watching, like they were living in a world where Jenna was their real daughter, the one they were proud of. I was the second choice, the afterthought. The one they only turned to when they needed someone to pick up the slack. I didn't hate them for it. I just learned to live without them. Jenna, she never had to learn that. She was everything they could want in a daughter. Outgoing, charming, talented. She was the star in our little world, the one who always had their attention. Dance recitals, private lessons, summer camps. Things I'd been told we couldn't afford when I asked. Things that were always handed to her, without question. Without hesitation. And yet, despite everything, I always came back home. Not for Mom or Dad, but for my grandmother, Evelyn Nolan. The only person who ever seemed to see me for who I really was. Every time I walked through that door, her arms were the only ones that didn't feel like an obligation. She didn't just hug me, she made me feel like I mattered. She'd tap my cheek and whisper words that felt like a secret I could carry with me for the rest of my life. You're stronger than they think. But this Thanksgiving, this year, something felt different. The house was the same, bright lights in the windows, the smell of turkey in the air, but there was a tension in the air, something I couldn't shake. The way Mom kept darting around the kitchen with that tight smile like she was hiding something. The way Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. Jenna, of course, was in her element, fixing the table, running to and fro like she was in charge, like she always was. And me? I was still the one standing on the outside, looking in, watching it all. I wanted to believe it wasn't what it seemed. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be different this time. But the minute Jenna stood up at that table, tapping her glass, smiling that perfect rehearsed smile, I knew. I knew they were about to do it again. But this time, they weren't just giving her everything, they were taking something from me. They were stealing my future. And that's when I realized it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the entire family, the entire house we had all worked so hard to keep together. But no one, not even Jenna, knew what was really at stake. And I couldn't keep pretending. Not this time. The truth was about to come out whether they liked it or not.
Growing up, it wasn't that I hated Jenna. We had our moments. We used to share everything. Our room, our clothes, our secrets. She was my little sister, and I was the one who looked out for her, even when Mom and Dad seemed too busy to notice. I'd braid her hair before school, let her steal my favorite sweaters, and drive her to every birthday party, even though I hated getting stuck in the car for hours. Those were the days when we could laugh until we couldn't breathe, and I'd let her win at board games just to see her smile. I'll never forget the summer we spent in that tiny cabin by the lake. Just us, the woods, and the endless days of swimming and telling stories under the stars. I thought it was perfect. Our own little world, the two of us, no interruptions. Jenna had a way of making everything feel bigger than it was. And for a while, I thought we'd always be close, that I would always be her protector, her big sister who could do no wrong. But something changed as we got older. It wasn't that I noticed it at first, or at least I didn't want to. It was small things at first. The way Mom's eyes would light up when she talked about Jenna's dance recitals or school projects, how she'd always tell me to keep it down when I was excited about something, like my own accomplishments didn't matter. It wasn't blatant, but I felt it. Mom and Dad didn't have to say it out loud to know that Jenna was the one they were proud of. I became a shadow. As Jenna grew older, it was like everything she touched turned to gold. She went to private lessons, performed at school events, earned every trophy, and always found a way to be the center of attention. No one ever questioned it. They didn't need to. Jenna was perfect in their eyes. But as perfect as Jenna was, she never noticed how things started to shift between us. I had my own dreams, my own ideas about what my life should look like, but they always seemed smaller, quieter. It wasn't that I wasn't successful. I was, in my own way. I moved to Chicago to build a career, far from Springfield's small-town expectations. I loved it, but every time I came home, the same old feeling hit me. The unspoken understanding that no matter how much I achieved, I would never be the daughter they expected. No matter how many dinners I attended, how many phone calls I made, I was still the one who was never truly seen. Even after I moved out, I kept coming home for holidays, not for Mom and Dad, but for Grandma Evelyn. She was the only one who ever saw me for me. When I was younger, she'd pull me close, tap my cheek with those gentle fingers, and whisper, "You're stronger than they think." It was the only reassurance I ever got, the only time I felt truly valued. Grandma didn't have to say much. She just knew. She knew that deep down, I was more than just the invisible daughter in the background. But in the months leading up to that Thanksgiving, even Grandma's comfort seemed distant. Something felt off. Maybe it was the way Jenna posted photos online, showing off new gifts from Mom and Dad, or how everything felt just a little too perfect. Jenna and Tyler were planning their future together, talking about the house they'd buy and how everything was going to change. I didn't know what that change meant, but I could feel it. A shift. A deep, insidious shift. The call I got 6 months ago from Mom should have tipped me off. It was a simple ask, at least that's how she made it sound. "Sweetheart, we need you to come home. Something important. Just sign a few papers." She sounded so normal. It didn't seem strange, not at first. My mind was too focused on work, on the chaos I was living in, but something in my gut told me I should have asked for more details. When I arrived, Mom and Dad were already sitting at the kitchen table, their smiles a little too wide, their eyes too eager. Dad had a folder in front of him, like he was preparing for a presentation. That's when the unease first started creeping in. "It's just a refinance," Dad said, his voice calm, but something was off. I felt it, like a warning in the air.
I knew this wasn't just about paperwork, not with the way they were acting. I pushed, asking to take the papers home to my lawyer, and that's when the silence hit. The abrupt change in their faces told me everything. They didn't want me to look too closely. They didn't want me to see what was really going on. It's just a formality, Dad insisted, but I felt the weight of their desperation. I shouldn't have signed anything, but I did what I always did, went along with it, even when I knew something was wrong. But when I took those papers to my lawyer in Chicago, everything became clear. "This isn't a refinance, Emily," she told me over the phone the next morning. "It's a transfer of liability. If you sign this, you're taking on their debt." Debt. The word hit me like a punch. That's when I knew. I wasn't just being asked to sign papers, I was being asked to clean up their mess. And they thought I wouldn't notice, wouldn't care. Maybe they thought I wouldn't be the one to figure it out. But they didn't know me. Not really. I wasn't their backup plan anymore.
After that phone call from my lawyer, everything changed. I thought I had prepared myself for the worst, but nothing prepared me for what was about to come. I could feel it in the air when I went back home for the holidays, the same tension I had sensed months before, now thick enough to cut through. My family was different, and the closer I got to uncovering the truth, the more I realized they had been hiding something from me all along. The Thanksgiving dinner should have felt like any other, but everything felt wrong. Even before Jenna made her announcement, I knew the night would be a turning point. As I walked into the dining room, I noticed the empty chair. It wasn't just empty. It was missing, not moved or tucked aside, but gone entirely. I didn't say anything, but my stomach tightened. The chair next to mine, where Dad would sit, was gone. The message was clear. I was no longer a part of this. I wasn't meant to be included. But I brushed it off. I couldn't afford to dwell on it. There were bigger things at stake. Or so I thought. Jenna floated around the room, effortlessly checking the table, adjusting the napkins, making sure everything was just so. She moved with the confidence of someone who had already claimed their prize, their place. I watched her laugh louder, her presence brighter, her charm even more perfect. It was like she had stepped into a role she was born to play, the center of attention. I couldn't bring myself to smile at her anymore. The smile I gave her was tight, forced, like one you give to a coworker you have to tolerate but don't particularly like. The conversation flowed around me like a gentle river, calm and polite, but under the surface, everything was changing. Dad seemed distant. He barely spoke to me. Every time I tried to join in, he would nod absently, distracted by something, anything, other than me. Mom's forced smile was back, the one she wore when there was something they didn't want to say, and the way she kept adjusting the centerpiece, smoothing things out, like it was the only thing keeping the chaos from spilling over. It all felt so rehearsed. And then there was that moment, a slip, a little thing that seemed too small to matter, but it did. Tyler, Jenna's fiancé, caught my eye from across the table, his expression tight with something I couldn't place. He didn't smile like he normally did. Instead, he looked at me for a second too long, almost like he wanted to say something but was holding back. I didn't know what to make of it, but I felt it. The unease was spreading. Later, as I helped clean up the table, my mom pulled me aside, her voice low and strained. She said, "You look beautiful tonight, sweetheart," her voice too high, too forced. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. But she wasn't looking at me, not really. Her eyes were darting around, avoiding mine. Then she dropped it. "Jenna's been so excited about the house. She's been asking about when things will be finalized." Something inside me snapped, but I kept my voice steady. "The house?" she repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. There was something she wasn't saying, and I knew it. I couldn't pin it down exactly, but I could feel the words floating in the air like poison, ready to hit me. That wasn't the only thing she wasn't telling me. They weren't giving her the house, they were giving her the debt. It wasn't just their way of passing on the family home, they were offloading their mess onto her. I had already seen the papers. I knew they were trying to push everything onto Jenna. I couldn't believe they were doing this not to me, but to her too. They were trying to trap her in the same way they tried to trap me. But Jenna didn't know. She couldn't know. Not yet. And that's when I realized I couldn't stay quiet anymore.
I had to do something, but I wasn't sure how to begin. How do you pull the rug out from under someone when they're still smiling on top of it? The next day, I decided to look into it further. I wasn't just going to sit around and let this happen again. I had to act. I had to take control. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about something far bigger. The debt wasn't just a number on paper. It was a weapon, a ticking bomb that would destroy everything. I spent the entire day going over every detail in the documents I had, checking numbers, cross-referencing payments, and pulling every piece of the puzzle together. What I found sent a cold wave through me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Jenna. But would she see it the same way when the truth finally came out? The tension was growing, pulling at every thread, and with every moment that passed, the truth seemed to move closer and closer to the surface, closer to the moment when it would break everything wide open. But I wasn't ready to confront Jenna yet. Not until I had all the pieces, not until I could finally make them see what they'd done. But as I walked back to the dining room that night, I noticed something that stopped me dead in my tracks. The empty chair was back.
It wasn't just the house anymore. It was everything. The lies, the manipulation, the way they twisted every little thing until I didn't know what was real anymore. I had the papers. I had all the evidence, but it didn't feel like enough. I had to confront them. I had to expose the truth, no matter what the cost. And yet, as I sat in that living room, I still couldn't bring myself to face them directly. The words were heavy, like stones sitting on my chest. My family had always been the thing I tried to fix, tried to hold together, even when I knew it was falling apart. But this wasn't something I could fix. It wasn't something I could ignore. It was Thanksgiving, the same as every year. But everything felt so different now. The house, the food, the conversations, it all felt like part of a show, a performance they'd been rehearsing for weeks, maybe months. I could feel it in my bones. But Jenna, she had no idea. She was still smiling, still telling stories about her future, as if none of this had touched her. She was still the golden child, and I was just the shadow that followed. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. Not anymore. I didn't stand up like Jenna did. I didn't tap my glass. I didn't need to. Instead, I slid the folder from my bag and placed it carefully in front of me, in full view of the table. The room went still. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't need to. I just let it sit there, the weight of it pressing down on the air, hanging between us like a dark cloud. Jenna was the first to notice, her eyes flicking down to the folder. "What's that?" she asked, her voice still light. Too light. She didn't know. She couldn't, not yet. But the seeds of doubt were already planted. I opened the folder slowly, pulling out the pages one by one. I let the silence stretch between us, every second more unbearable than the last. I didn't need to say much. The papers spoke for themselves. The overdue notices, the second mortgage, the foreclosure warning, it was all right there, in black and white. "This house isn't a gift, Jenna," I said, softly, my voice steady, despite the storm swirling inside me. "This is a debt. Your inheritance comes with over $100,000 in debt." There it was. The bomb had dropped, but no one knew how to react. Mom's face turned pale, her lips trembling, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. She knew exactly what I was saying. And Dad, his face went red, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Jenna's eyes widened, her hand gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing holding her up. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, that can't be true. They would have told me." But they hadn't. And now she was learning the truth the same way I had, too late. "They didn't tell you because they didn't want you to know," I said,
looking straight at her. But here's the thing, Jenna. This isn't a home. It's a trap. They're passing off their mess to you, and you're about to sign away your future for it. Her face crumpled, the mask of confidence slipping away. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, the anger in her voice breaking through. "Why didn't you warn me?" I couldn't answer her. Not because I didn't want to, but because the answer was too simple. I had tried to warn her. I had tried to stop this. But she never heard me, never seen me. I was invisible to her, just like I had always been invisible to everyone else. Dad finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Emily, you're making this worse than it is. We're handling it." But I wasn't listening to him anymore. I couldn't. I was done with their lies. "You're not handling anything," I snapped, holding up another page. This one with a foreclosure notice stamped across it in bold red letters. "This isn't just a mistake, Dad. This is a disaster." The room seemed to shrink around us. My Aunt Diane's voice broke the silence, her sharp tone cutting through the tension. "Daniel, is this true?" Dad's jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. He couldn't. Jenna turned to him, her eyes wide, desperate for reassurance, but there was none to be found. And that's when Tyler, her fiancé, stood up. He didn't even look at her as he walked away. He just turned and headed for the door. "I thought this was supposed to be a fresh start," he muttered under his breath. "You said everything was fine, that we could build a life here. But I'm not starting a life on a sinking ship." I saw Jenna's world unravel in that moment. She stood frozen in her seat, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Tyler," she whispered, but he was already out the door, leaving her behind. The tears came then, falling slowly, as if she was finally realizing everything I had known for months. My mother sobbed, her face hidden behind her hands, but Dad just sat there, his face crumpled in defeat. There were no more excuses, no more lies. And as I watched them crumble, I couldn't help but think, this was never about the house. It was about everything they had hidden from us for years. And now, finally, it was all coming to light.
The room was still. No one moved. The chaos from moments before had quieted into an oppressive silence. The air felt thick, suffocating. The shock of the truth had hit everyone differently. Mom still sat, head in her hands, sobbing softly, unable to look at any of us. Dad sat across from me, staring at his hands, his face ashen. I could hear his breathing, shallow and ragged, but he said nothing. Jenna sat frozen in her seat, her face pale, tears staining her cheeks. I didn't move. I couldn't. I had no idea what to say or even if there was anything left to say. The person I'd once been, quiet, invisible, was now gone, replaced by someone who finally had the strength to say the things no one else would. But it felt hollow now, the victory empty. This wasn't the celebration I had imagined. This wasn't how I thought it would feel to finally expose the truth. The truth had always been supposed to set you free, but for me, it felt more like a weight. I stood up without a word, the sound of my chair scraping the floor loud in the quiet room. There was no anger in me anymore, no sharp words left to throw. I just felt empty. Everything we had, everything I had been holding onto for so long, was crumbling. I wasn't sure if I was sad for myself anymore, or if I was just grieving the family I thought I had, the family I'd spent so long trying to fix. I walked to the window and stared outside, trying to clear my head. The sun had set, and the sky was darkening, a grayness settling over the house. It felt like a metaphor, a house full of broken promises, with no way to fix them. The truth had come out, but the cost was far greater than I had ever anticipated. And then, just when I thought I couldn't feel any more numb, I felt it. A soft tap on my shoulder. I turned around slowly, not expecting anyone to approach me, but it was Jenna. She looked small, fragile, like the little sister who used to crawl into my bed when she was scared of the dark. "Emily," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know any of this was happening." I didn't know how to respond. A part of me wanted to forgive her right then and there, to tell her it wasn't her fault that she hadn't known. But another part of me couldn't forget the years of feeling invisible, the years of living in her shadow, waiting for something, anything from our parents. She was still the golden child, the one who would always be loved more, even if it was built on a lie. I looked at her, my gaze steady. I said, "It's not your fault," my voice soft. "But you need to understand, Jenna. This isn't just about you. It's about everything they've built on top of us, everything they've hidden." She nodded, tears welling up again. I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't know what to say to anyone. But the realization hit me then. I wasn't going to let this continue. This silence, this emptiness between us, wasn't going to be the final chapter of my story. I couldn't change them, couldn't make them see me, but I could change how I reacted. I could change how much of this I was willing to take. I walked to the door, leaving Jenna behind, still silent in the living room. As I stepped out into the cold evening air, I felt the weight of the past few hours settle in my chest. But there was something else, something deeper. The beginnings of a plan, a shift, a new direction. The first step toward reclaiming my life. I wasn't sure where I was going or what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to keep allowing myself to be their scapegoat. I wasn't going to keep hiding in the background. Not anymore. The world outside was dark. The quiet so heavy it felt suffocating. But it didn't matter. I could breathe now. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I could finally move forward.
The drive home felt longer than it should have. The cold air outside wasn't enough to clear the fog in my head. But as I turned the corner onto the familiar street, the weight of the past few hours settled in. Everything had changed. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my place and their lives, had been upended in a single moment. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment, still carrying the heaviness of the truth. Jenna, Mom, Dad, all of them were still in that house, caught in the aftermath of what I had exposed. I could feel the echoes of that moment, the silence, the disbelief, pounding in my chest. But this wasn't just about the revelation anymore. It was about what I was going to do with it. Inside my apartment, I sat at my desk, the papers from earlier scattered in front of me. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, the weight of the pen in my hand heavy with intention. I had always been the quiet one, the invisible one, the one who stayed in the background. But no more. I wasn't going to let my family dictate my future, not when I knew the truth. I started to plan. My fingers moved with purpose as I jotted down notes. The second mortgage, the missed payments, the foreclosure looming in the distance. I could see it all now. Every mistake, every misstep they'd made, every lie they'd told. And it wasn't just their debt. It was a cycle of manipulation I had been too blind to see. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It wasn't about making them pay. It was about taking control of my life and making sure that no one, not even my family, could ever use me again. I was going to ensure that the consequences of their actions were clear, not just for me, but for everyone else who had been in the dark. I didn't need to hurt them. They had already done that to themselves. But I could expose them. I could make sure that everyone, Jenna included, understood the depth of the lies they'd told. I would show her, show everyone just how deep the hole they had dug really was. As I continued writing, my thoughts shifted. The anger from earlier, the frustration, had turned into something more methodical. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was calculating. I had the evidence, the knowledge, and the plan. All I needed was the right moment. But there were boundaries, moral ones, that I couldn't cross. I couldn't destroy them. That was never the goal. I wasn't here to burn bridges, even if they had burned them with me. I just needed them to see what they had done, to understand the cost of their actions. I needed them to listen. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking, but I didn't feel the same uncertainty I had before. This wasn't about shame or guilt anymore. It was about justice. and I was ready to take the first step toward it. The plan was simple. Exposing the truth wasn't enough. I needed to make sure it was undeniable, irreversible. I would reach out to the people who could help me, the bank, the lawyer, the people who had been left in the dark, the ones who could shatter the illusion of this perfect family. They had to face the consequences of their actions. And if Jenna didn't understand now, she would soon.
So here we are. Emily's life is turned upside down, and the truth has just begun to unravel. What would you have done in her place? Would you have stayed quiet, or would you have exposed the lies, even if it meant tearing the family apart? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Have you ever had to confront a family secret? What was the breaking point for you? And don't forget to hit that like button if you're ready to see what happens next in Emily's journey. This story isn't over yet, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming.
It wasn't about revenge anymore. The truth had to come out, and I was the only one who could make it happen. Jenna had no idea what she was about to sign. She was still walking around the house like everything was perfect, acting like the daughter who had it all figured out. But I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let her inherit this false dream of a perfect family. The night I had planned finally arrived. I had everything in place. The documents, the proof, the witnesses. I'd done my homework, made sure every piece of the puzzle was connected. All I needed was the right moment, a time when no one could deny the truth. I showed up at their house again, this time more prepared than I'd ever been. The air felt different this time, tense, as though everyone was waiting for something to happen. Jenna was busy arranging flowers on the table, all smiles, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Mom and Dad were already at the table, not talking to each other, just sitting in silence. "Jenna," I said, quietly, my voice steady, almost too calm. She looked up from her task, surprised to see me standing there, but there was no warmth in her expression. It was that same distant, polite smile she always gave me these days, like I was someone she barely knew. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice laced with uncertainty. I could see the flicker of confusion in her eyes, the subtle shift in her posture. She wasn't sure where this was going, but I was about to show her. I pulled out the folder, placing it on the table in front of her. I didn't look at Mom or Dad. I didn't need to. They knew what was coming. "It's about the house," I said, looking straight at her. "The one you're about to sign for, the one you think is a gift. But I need you to know, this isn't just a house. It's a trap, a burden, a debt that's going to swallow you whole." Her eyes widened as she looked at the papers. She reached for them, but I pulled them back just as her fingers brushed the edge. "What is this?" she whispered now, her voice trembling. Her confidence from before was gone. She was scared. Terrified, in fact. I could see it on her face, the way she was processing the reality of what was about to happen. I said, "It's everything they never told you. It's the second mortgage, the overdue payments, the foreclosure notices, all of it. And when you sign those papers, you're responsible for it all. Every penny of debt they've buried beneath their so-called perfect life." Her breath caught in her throat, her hands shaking as she tried to flip through the pages. She was looking for something, anything, that would make it right again. But it was too late. The truth had already settled in. And there was no going back. The golden child was gone, and in her place was a woman who had to face the consequences of the choices made by people she trusted. Mom and Dad sat in silence, their faces drained of color. Dad's hand was clenched so tightly around the edge of his chair that his knuckles were white. He couldn't speak. He couldn't. His silence spoke louder than anything else. Jenna finally looked up, her eyes full of tears now, her face crumpling under the weight of the truth. But I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. She had to face this. We all did. And then, just as I thought the moment couldn't get any worse, the doorbell rang. I froze. No one was supposed to come. Not like this. I glanced at Jenna, who wiped her tears away hastily, but I could see the panic on her face. It was the last thing she expected, the last thing anyone expected. "Who could that be?" Mom asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. She got up slowly, eyes darting nervously toward the door. I didn't have to say anything. I knew exactly who it was. The door opened, and there she stood, the investigator, the one who had been following the trail,
the one who had connected the dots between the missed payments and the fraudulent documents. She had arrived, and with her, the final piece of the puzzle. "Mr. and Mrs. Nolan?" she asked, her voice calm and professional. "I need to speak with you about your mortgage records." The silence in the room was deafening. This was it. The truth had finally caught up with them, and there was no way out now. The walls were closing in.
The investigation didn't take long. The lies unraveled quickly, like a thread pulled too tightly, snapping under pressure. The bank, already aware of the missed payments and mounting debt, was quick to intervene. My parents' attempts to explain away the mess fell flat. The weight of their failure was undeniable, and in the days that followed, their world seemed to crumble even further. The house, once an emblem of their pride, was now a symbol of their mistakes. Mom moved out first. She couldn't bear to stay in the house any longer, not with the reality of the situation hanging over her. Dad stayed behind for a while, unable to accept that everything they had worked for was slipping away. He spent days going through the old papers, trying to find some way to fix it, but it was too late. The house was sold off to pay the debts, and by the time the dust settled, all that remained were memories of what had once been. Jenna, for the most part, was left in shock. She hadn't understood the full extent of what had happened until it was too late. At first, she blamed me, accusing me of tearing the family apart, of making things worse, but I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth had already hit her. There was no denying it now. I spent most of the following weeks in silence, retreating to my apartment in Chicago, trying to process everything that had happened. There was no satisfaction in watching them crumble, no relief. All I felt was empty. The family I thought I knew was gone, replaced by something unrecognizable, and I didn't know where I fit into it anymore. But something changed in me. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that dining room weeks ago. The Emily who had been invisible, who had stayed silent for so long, was gone. I had taken control, for better or for worse. I had exposed the truth, and in doing so, I had found a strength I didn't know I had. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I wasn't going to keep hiding behind the shadows. Jenna called me a few days later, her voice softer now, broken in a way I hadn't heard before. I didn't know Emily. I swear I didn't know. Her words weren't an apology, not really, but it was the closest she could get. I could hear the pain in her voice, the weight of everything she had just lost. "I know," I said quietly, my voice calm but firm. "But you need to understand something, Jenna. This wasn't just about the house. It was about everything they've hidden from us, everything they've kept from us for years." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "I don't know what to do now." I didn't know what to say. I had no answers for her. We had both been living in a lie, trapped in a world that wasn't real. But it wasn't about fixing it anymore. It was about moving forward, about rebuilding, about finding ourselves again. I didn't go back to Springfield. I didn't need to. The family I had once known no longer existed, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to keep going back, to keep trying to fix what was broken. The truth had been exposed, and that was enough. I had finally set myself free. As for Jenna, she took time away from her fiancé, from the family, to process what had happened. Slowly, she began to rebuild her life, trying to make sense of everything. She called me often, sometimes just to talk, sometimes just to sit in silence. And though we weren't close the way we used to be, there was something healing in those quiet conversations. Something that reminded me that even though everything had changed, we could still find a way to move forward, together, in our own way. Months later, I saw my parents at a coffee shop when I was visiting my grandmother's grave. They looked different, older, worn down by everything that had happened. Mom didn't say anything to me, and Dad's gaze was still distant, like he wasn't sure where he stood with me anymore. But I didn't care. I wasn't angry anymore. I had walked away from all the guilt, all the resentment that had been weighing me down for so long. I didn't need their approval.
I didn't need to carry their burden anymore. And I realized something important. Sometimes you have to let go of what's holding you back in order to move forward. The world around me had changed, but in that quiet moment, I felt something shift inside of me. It was the beginning of something new, and though the path wasn't clear and the road ahead still had its bumps, I knew this much. I was ready. Ready to keep living, to keep moving forward, ready to face whatever came next.
Looking back at everything that happened, at the way the truth came crashing down, the way my family fell apart, and the way I had to find my own voice in the middle of all the chaos, I realized something important. For years, I thought I was the one who had to fix everything, to smooth over the cracks and pretend everything was fine. I carried the weight of their lies and their guilt, thinking it was my responsibility to keep the family together. But in the end, I learned that sometimes the hardest thing is not to fix what's broken, but to let go of it. I thought I needed their approval, their love, their recognition. But what I needed most was to stop hiding in the shadows. I needed to stop playing the role they had assigned to me, the quiet, invisible daughter, and start living for myself. I had spent so long trying to make them proud, trying to fit into a mold they had created, but in doing so, I had lost sight of who I really was. The truth, no matter how painful, set me free. And in the end, it wasn't just about what my family did, it was about what I chose to do next. In the aftermath, I realized something else. The truth isn't always easy, and it doesn't always come at the perfect time. But it is the only way forward, the only way to break the cycle of silence and denial. I didn't destroy my family by telling the truth. They had already destroyed themselves by refusing to face it. And by stepping into the light, by confronting the reality of what was happening, I gave myself the chance to move on. Maybe things won't ever be the same. Maybe I'll never have the relationship with my family that I always thought I'd have. But I've learned that I don't need them to define me. The only person who can truly change my life is me. And that's the most freeing realization of all. So, what happens after you expose the truth? What happens when the family you thought you knew falls apart? In Emily's case, it wasn't just about bringing down the walls. It was about building something new from the rubble, something she could finally call her own. But the journey didn't end there. There's still more to this story. The choices she made didn't just change her family's fate, they changed her own. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Would you expose the secrets or keep them buried for the sake of peace? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit subscribe for more. The journey to reclaiming our lives from the lies we've been told is never easy, but it's worth it. Stay tuned because the next chapter is coming and it might just hit closer to home than you think.